This is Jonathan Ferguson, the Keeper of Firearms and Artillery at the Royal Armouries Museum in the UK, which houses a collection of thousands of iconic weapons from throughout history. And on this week's episode, in anticipation for Black Ops 6, he's taking another look at the guns of Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War.
A pleasingly ordinary looking Papasha looks pretty good. You'd expect it to. In this time frame, this is still a very competitive weapon. And just as I'm getting all enthusiastic about it, Dave shows me this absolute abomination.
We've got plenty of other episodes looking at the weaponry of Call of Duty, so make sure to subscribe to check those out, and let us know what other games you'd like to see us cover in the comment section down below. Right, over to Jonathan.
We're out the gates with a weird one, and I will admit I had to remind myself of this one. Obviously, we have a 5.45mm AK magazine, so AK-74 magazine. There's a dimple in that lower receiver that reminds us of, well, the AK-74 or the AKM, but there's precious little else about this thing that looks Kalashnikov, and that's for a good reason. This is an obscure, super obscure, prototype only Armenian automatic rifle or assault rifle, or whatever you want to call it. It's actually very, I'm smirking only because they've included this thing that almost doesn't exist, but it's actually really interesting. It's a lever delayed blowback system. So it has no gas system, which makes it lighter. It's shorter, as it were, in terms of height. It's quite a short, compact weapon as well. But as it is, it came in 1997, I think, in its finished form, well after pre-existing things had dominated the market, so it wasn't going to go anywhere. I think that's too late for the, well, in fact, I'm sure that's too late for the time frame of this game, so it shouldn't be in the game. A, because I've only seen one that definitely exists, and because it's too late. But it does look the part, and it gives you that kind of AK feel, but it's something very different. Is this modified?
This is modified, yeah. I had to include some tape on a grip for you.
I was about to say, as we all know, wrapping some tape around a grip radically changes the handling characteristics of any firearm. That looks to have the auto eject system. So going back, this would, well, I think in period, this would be an arm cell striker. It's changed manufacturers, it's changed names multiple times. Maybe not the best design ever, but it's very 80s action movie specifically. So I have no problem at all with it being in the game. I'm not sure about the rail and the iron sights being on the rail. It looks like they've put a Picatinny on it, but just spaced out the grooves to make it look more like a Weaver type rail, but or the classical Weaver rail of the era, which just had a couple of slots in it because it was just designed for optic on, optic off. It wasn't for different positions.
I did time it, not that it was really necessary, but it is much faster to just die and respawn than it is to reload this thing from empty back to full.
Remember, dying and respawning is quicker than reloading. Life is cheap in the world of Call of Duty. Another very interesting Cold War firearm. So this looks like some sort of unholy union twixt FAL and, well, I don't know, I guess it looks like an alternate universe FNC or maybe a CAL. A 5.56 FAL lookalike is what I'm getting at. However, it's not an FAL or a CAL, and it isn't really an FNC either. It's its own thing. It's essentially a 5.56 FAL style AK. If you see this thing stripped, it has the classic long stroke piston, carrier, and rotating bolt of an AK. But the receiver design is completely different, of course. So this is Argentinian, sorry. FARA 83. That red dot sight's far too compact for this time period. The lines look quite nicely vintage, but it's very, very small. And we have Picatinny rail there as well on that rail adapter. Remind me of the year here, Dave.
Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War is set in 1981.
Absolutely not. No, the sight is completely off for that. The rifle itself is a couple of years too new as well. And Picatinny rail, new. You could achieve the same cool Cold War-y look and make it period correct. So you should. Another obscure firearm, the LAPA SM Modelo 3. So as much as I'm rolling my eyes when I see anything but a tube scope being put on one of these guns in a early 80s time frame, this thing here is very reminiscent of the Elbit Falcon series, which we haven't got, unfortunately, but that big sight protector hoop lens holder thing on the front. Fairly big and chunky form factor. It's not a precise match by any means, but it's very similar to those. Early 90s though, so we're at least 10 years out of date for that thing. I'm not aware of a reflex sight as anything like as compact as that in the early 80s.
Multiple enemy spy plane contacts. Multiple.
Yes, the weird G11 that is not much like a G11. I still don't know why they so radically changed it. It's a cool design. It clearly evokes the G11, but it's just so different. I mean, notably the magazine not being on the top but the front there. I mean, it must be nice for artists to be able to just go wild and come up with something completely original. Me being me, I always prefer the real thing. We're back to the old sight protector problem here. So that rear sight is sticking well up out of the carry handle, as is the front sight. So if you drop that on its top, you have at least lost zero and possibly even destroyed your ability to aim. Now, going back in time here to a proper G11, and it's a shameless opportunity to give you a sneak peek of this. Don't get too excited. This isn't ours. This is borrowed from a... Well, you know who you are. Thank you very much. It's great just to have it in hand, frankly. There is that crank cocking handle. Sadly missing the flap that you actually get hold of, but that's the same feature there. We've got the magazine on the front here. And I think we have roughly the correct model of G11, because there are multiple. This is, as it says on it, this is the American Advanced Combat Rifle trial version, which is its ultimate kind of most refined form, really. Now, this thing is tremendously complicated, and hopefully you'll all forget that we have it, and I can go into some detail somewhere else about it. As a soldier, as a user of this thing, if your gun stops working, you pretty much want to throw away this bit and just shove on a new one, because it's very, very complicated, and it would be going back to the factory, I think, to be repaired, refurbished or whatever. So it would have been a real shift in how they fit into the logistical chain, as it were. Really, really cool to have this in hand. I hope you enjoy it as well.
To me, that is the sort of Call of Duty Black Ops weapon. So it's a sort of a shame that it's become the CARV too. It's very cool to sort of see it in real life, but yeah, we had to go back to the original Black Ops to. I mean, we basically just did it as an excuse to show it off. Like we can give that peek behind the curtain. There was a cool gun that you had, and we wanted to show it off, so we're going to show it off.
Yeah, and no disrespect to the designer of the CARV, but it's not a G11.
Frag.
Right, bit of vanilla. Vanilla Cold War firearms. M16A2. Looking pretty good to me. Here's one. This is the commercial M16A2, but this is looking pretty good. It even has the visibly long A2 pattern buttstock, the bump on the pistol grip there, round forward assist button. I won't bore you to death with all of those. And the proportions look correct, i.e. the barrel length. If I was going to get really, really nerdy, we actually have a slightly smaller diameter portion here of the barrel that is not... I don't think I've seen that represented on any in-game M16A2. So I guess because this is a military firearm with a military designation, we're all good legally speaking, and it's pretty good. I've just noticed the trigger guard area is inexplicably tall. It's almost like a built-in Arctic version with a very tall trigger. Could be some weird perspective thing. The only real anomaly for me, one is that it shouldn't exist yet. Just the design was basically there by 81, but it's not actually available yet. So, and it's not like it's some super duper prototype thing that's going to give you some great tactical advantage. It's a refinement.
This weapon's under the tactical rifle family, which means they're all sort of single or 3-round burst. This being 3-round burst. So could that be why they've gone A2?
I mean, yes. I don't know which way round it's been developed, but yes, absolutely. So the A2 has introduced one of the features, the least controversial feature in that everyone hates it. The 3-round burst was a feature of the A2 rifle as introduced into the US Marines originally, and then the US Army a couple of years later, I think 83 and 86. So this might just sneak in depending on which mission you're in or something. Oh, good Lord. Okay. Yeah, that's actually pretty cursed. The, quote, flash guard 5.56mm is enormous. Don't know why that's so huge. The laser sight is not a million miles away from kind of late 90s. Strap it to the barrel style laser sight, but it's far too small and compact for this era. The original CAR-15 submachine gun, yes, it was a submachine gun, had little triangular handguards a bit like this. That's probably where they've got those from, but they don't look good here, I'm afraid. The idea of a pistol grip screwed or bodged to the bottom of the handguard, that's very authentically 80s, 90s. I like that. The huge quad stack mag is way ahead of its time and is a weird capacity. I'm also not aware of any telescoping buffer tube buttstocks of that sort of PDW nature as early as that. I'd be amazed. Maybe someone bodged one together in the early 80s, but I've never seen one. Yeah. And weird. What's with 16.3-inch barrel as well? And how is a barrel rapid fire or not? This whole thing is confusing. And I haven't even mentioned the giraffe pattern. I have a new emotional support weapon. Yet another weird gun, very reminiscent of the Soviet cosmonaut TP-82 survival gun pistol thing. Can't compare with a real one, but the design is actually quite different. As far as I know, this thing's long out of production. I can't imagine time-traveling Soviet lawyers are going to come knocking on your door for replicating the real thing. So, as ever, not sure why it's so different. Essentially functions like the classic sawn-off double-barreled thing. Undeniably cool.
Without the 5.45 barrel of the TP-82 as well, it's just, yeah, like Soviet double-barrel shotguns. Because every Call of Duty needs a double-barrel shotgun, really.
Good point. The TP-82 is a sort of a Zwilling kind of concept of shotgun and survival rifle / self-defense weapon, or defense weapon against large bears, that kind of thing. So to only have the two, it may as well be Mad Max, really.
Target's down.
A pleasingly ordinary-looking Papasha looks pretty good. You'd expect it to. There's plenty of available reference material and pre-existing versions in other COD games. They have all of the retro firearms to put it, well, retro by the early 1980s to put in a game of this nature. I think this is one of the more appropriate because these things are still showing up in the Iraq War. They're still showing up in Ukraine. In this time frame, this is still a very competitive weapon. The round penetrates well, very high rate of fire, very controllable. And just as I'm getting all enthusiastic about it, Dave shows me this absolute abomination.
Always makes you feel bad when you're in the middle of your enthusiastic chat about a gun and then something like this pops up.
Not bad enough to not do it again, though. You can barely detect the Papasha under all of this. That's clearly meant to be a polymer stock, so that's replaced. I guess the core action would still be the real thing, and then everything else is stuck on top. That drum mag makes me weep. I hate those legendary type weapons. Why is it green?
So the only way I could unlock this was by buying a blueprint and then taking all of the extra guff off. I couldn't get rid of the red pieces and I couldn't get rid of the green traces. So just ignore that.
Okay. Oh, and you've gone to the trouble of going underwater. In case you're wondering what I'm talking about, this is loosely based on the Russian APS underwater assault rifle, although the magazine on it makes it look more like the Chinese equivalent of it. Now, I actually got my hands on one of these. Really interesting gun. It's essentially just sheet metal construction, big old spring. Can be shot out of water, just not massively effectively because the projectiles are great big needle-like darty things, but they're loaded into a conventional cartridge case, so they're kind of weird, and they're designed to travel through water without immediately tumbling or fragmenting. This is what you need to actually hit anyone beyond about 2 meters through water. And in a pinch, you could shoot it above water, but realistically, you're supposed to switch to a different weapon. Did you notice any different behavior between underwater and above water? It looks wildly inaccurate.
No, I think you can fire any weapon underwater in Cold War, so I think it was just the setting of the development of the weapon that made it a weapon for the game. And there's very little water on the maps of the game. Yeah, it's not really a gimmick it played into. But no, in Cold War it was just a pretty bad assault rifle.
The Stoner 63, very time period appropriate. The Navy SEALs hung on to these things until I think the mid-80s at least. So it's a 5.56 lightweight, high rate of fire, light machine gun. So I have one here. This is the XM207E1, which appears to be what we have here, I think. So this was actually, that XM designation is US Army. So this was US Army Special Forces troop trials. I don't know how much combat use they actually saw. The SEALs were the main actual users of them. However, I have seen photographic evidence of Navy SEAls with this barrel length, so it makes sense. They would have had access to the various Lego parts to convert this into whichever gun they wanted. That was the whole point of this modular system designed by Eugene Stoner of AR-15 fame. I mean, it stands to reason. They get them with the long barrel. A lot of them are going to swap them for the shorter barrel to make it even more compact and lighter. No bipod, you'll notice on this one. And again, I don't think I've seen SEALs in Vietnam with a bipod. This is not intended for use as an LMG in the traditional sense. This is what we'd now call, or what the market would now call, an assault machine gun. So a light machine gun designed for firing offhand. So I think it's got a different manufacturer now, but I know it as the Denel NTW-20 South African 20mm bullpup bolt action anti-materiel rifle, pretty much as you see here. Firing it from the shoulder is a bit of a stretch. It's very stable on target there. If it is possible to fire this thing from the shoulder, you'd probably do it once. This thing isn't in existence till 1998, so it's way out. Really quite odd left-hand bolt there. Don't think there's anything else in the game, or any other recent COD game, that has the bolt on the wrong side and the mag, therefore, on the wrong side. Don't know why that would be. Now, I call this a bullpup. It's actually quasi-bullpup. The magazine is forward of the trigger. The face of the bolt is behind the trigger, but not substantially behind the grip. So by my own definition, it's not actually a bullpup, but it's it's a good test case of what is and what isn't. It's certainly a more compact design. Kind of has to be when you're dealing with a 20mm cannon round.
Enemy destroyed.
Enemy spy plane inbound.
RPD, period appropriate. Not, I don't think, for actual Soviet Army use. They've binned it off in favor of the RPK by this point, and the PKM. I have one here. This is a first pattern Soviet RPD in really nice condition. Very nicely made, actually. Nice blued finish. Overall, I think this is fine. The disintegrating links spitting out the right-hand side are wrong, though. This is what they should look like. Standard Soviet style non-disintegrating links, which just come out the side of the gun and you collect them in a pile and reinsert rounds and use them again. You can see there that this is in fact the short 7.62 by 39 AK SKS round in a belt-fed machine gun, which was the sort of point really of the RPD. Lacks the long range punch, as it were, and precision of the PKM. It's reasonably light for a machine gun, but the PKM isn't much heavier and is much more capable. This thing is kind of obsolete by this point, but they were still around. They're still around today. You know, these things are very robust. You probably come across them still in use today. They use a very readily available round. I don't have any problem with it being in the game. It's one of the least problematic guns in the game, actually.
Artillery targeting detected.
Thanks for watching, guys. Those were guns of Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. Complicated title. I will get around to playing that one day. As ever, please do check out our Royal Armouries YouTube channel. There's a lot more of guns and me, if you like that sort of thing, over there. And we have our website, social media, and our museums as well. Our Reloaded exhibition of decorated firearms is coming to an end at the end of this month. So it's getting towards your last chance to see that. But whatever you do, join us here again next week.